What's up, everybody? This is Mason back with another episode. Really excited about our guest today. We have Kyle Mumma, the founder of NextPlay. NextPlay provides software and services to athletic departments to equip athletes with knowledge, skills, network, and confidence to build a fulfilling life after sports. So let's bring on Kyle and learn more about NextPlay. Old friend, how are you?
I'm good, man. What's going on? Good to see you.
So a little background for the viewers. Kyle went to Duke. He was my class. And at Duke, he was a manager, but the manager and the players, they become really close. We spend a lot of time together. And what's the quote Coach K likes to use? You guys are the lifeblood of the program.
That's what he says. He says coaches coach, players play, managers do everything else.
Yeah, that's for sure. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. So me and Kyle had lunch the other day. He was sharing with me what he was doing at NextPlay. I'm a big fan of it. I've already shared it with my high school, a couple other buddies who are trying to connect with their player group that they either played with or their alumni association. So let us hear from you. Sorry. Let us hear from you. Everybody wants to call once we start doing the interview. What is NextPlay and how are you guys serving players?
Yeah, so it started after my time with Duke Athletics. I felt like there was not quite enough support for athletes as they transition to what's next. There's a big identity hurdle for them to get over, and I wanted to help to solve that problem. We started being on campus, running workshops, trying to bring alumni back and just create opportunities for athletes to learn about different industries, different opportunities. And it slowly turned into a software company where now we have a mobile solution where organizations, teams can create a custom mobile app for their community and allow alumni, current players to engage around some of this career development content and around job opportunities. So like you said, our goal is, empowering athletes through the content, through the connections, to create a space for them to make that transition a little bit more seamlessly, more effectively.
Gotcha. So, what's the value for the institution or the team or whoever you're working with, and share some of the customers that you're working with to date, just to give our viewers some perspective.
Yeah, sure. So we started with, not surprisingly, given my ties, our services business started with Duke. We expanded that out to schools like Campbell, Davidson, Furman. Now we're working on our software with Iowa. We're hoping to get a Brotherhood app going soon for me and you to connect over. We've got a couple of NFL teams that we're talking to about serving their former player populations. So the value proposition for the organization really is maintaining that connectivity of their athletes or their community once they've moved on. So if you think about, it's not always easy for you and I to get in touch with guys that we were around when we were in school. Guys, people change phone numbers, they change email addresses, they change jobs. And so using these white label applications, these closed networks, we can create a space where you and I could connect over the Brotherhood app, whether you've changed phone numbers or email addresses over the years or not. And so it's a real opportunity for schools to create alumni engagement that's really hard for them to do right now. And it tends to be a way that alumni really want to give back. People want to contribute back to their alma mater, to current students at their school. And this provides a pathway for them to do that. And the ultimate result for an institution down the road is fundraising gains, right? Athletes tend to give back significantly less to their institution than the average student does. They become pretty disconnected. And so this is a way to keep them connected and then ultimately deliver some fundraising impact down the line.
Right. So, I'll just say, I was sharing this with you at lunch the other day. Coach K, who's the best, just took the time a couple weeks ago to get all his former players on a Zoom just to talk about state of the nation, so to speak. And that experience, having, what does he have, 100 former players or so get on a Zoom, you really don't even understand really, we can all relate to each other. Not that we all knew each other and had met each other, but I've never been part of a fraternity, but I see like guys who went to West Point, like they have such a tight knit alumni group, and they can relate on something. And I think it's really cool that you're pulling, for some of these groups, whether it's teams or institutions, people from different generations together, and they can connect on something in common and then collaborate from there. So I get excited about it. Like I said, I already shared it with my high school because, my experience as an alumnus right now is I get a typed letter in the mail, or I get an email, asking to donate, which is fine. But I prefer to connect with my cohort, or I prefer to connect with, I moved to a new city, who went to Christ school that's living in San Francisco, or who went to Christ school that's living in Denver. So I think that's really neat. What's your business model with the institutions? Are you charging them just a flat fee to white label the app, or what's the engagement look like?
Yeah, so it's an annual contract. So they're paying us on an annual basis for the software and/or for services. So some schools want, they just want us to white label a version of the software for them. They'll let their alumni and their staff put the content into it. Other schools are interested in the software and the content that we're creating. So we have, athletes like yourself creating videos for us all the time that current athletes can learn from. And then other schools want to do both the software platform and some on-campus, in-person services work. And so depending on what the school wants, we have the ability to put together a contract where they're paying an annual fee to us. And ideally, and this has been the case for most schools that we work with, the school should make back whatever they're paying us in fundraising dollars. It should be something that is, budget neutral for them, if not a positive item for their budget.
Gotcha. So you talked about career development. At Duke, we all go pro, so it's harder for us to relate. But what there's so many Duke haters. I just love to say certain things. What is the current support system for athletes, Division 1, 2, or 3 that have a good career? Professional ranks aren't in the cards, and now they have to go get a job. Because I think the one thing I want to highlight is how much of a sacrifice your college education is to thrive in sport. And no matter what, people talk about the NCAA all the time. The reality is we miss class. It's hard to be top of the class. You're taking tests on the road. Like it's not the traditional. Yeah, we're grateful that you guys compensated us in education on a scholarship, but what do they currently have in place for these athletes to pursue a career post athletic career?
Yeah, I mean, I used to play, and I had that experience, right? Like I remember going on a trip to, Wisconsin, right? And the team gets back at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you're supposed to roll out of bed and be at an 8:30 class, right? And that's a challenge that the average student just can't appreciate because it's not part of their experience. So schools do their best, right, to try to put systems in place to help their athletes succeed. But the reality is these athletes have a 40-hour-a-week job, essentially, plus the normal academic rigor, especially at a place like Duke, to then try to find time to do the type of exploration and the type of networking you need to do to create that career for yourself is really challenging. And a lot of schools have, a life skills department where they have their academic coordinators will help you put together a resume. But at the end of the day, schools are not incentivized to worry about what happens to you 5, 10, 20 years after you graduate. They're incentivized to think about what's your mental health in the moment? Are you physically prepared to play? Are you passing all your classes and staying eligible? Right? That's what they're incentivized to care about at the end of the day. And I tell people all the time, right? If Coach K made sure every one of our players got a great job at Morgan Stanley, but they lost every game, he'd get fired, right? That's not what he's getting judged on. He's getting judged on the fact that we win championships and we happen to, graduate our guys and take care of them afterwards. But schools are not incentivized from a professional standpoint to really care about the long-term outcomes of their athletes. And so it's somewhere that they need help. And it's somewhere that we can provide that help.
Got it. So a question from the audience, Jesse Straga asks, wondering if you can extend a network beyond just one college or team. She said she's a big fan of this because she doesn't like using Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups, and it's nice to have something separate, but can you extend that and go Duke, she says?
Yeah. Nice. Definitely go Duke. So it's interesting, right? It's the concept of closed social media networks is something that's happened before. I mean, originally, right, Facebook started as a closed network, LinkedIn started as a closed network. They've opened up over time because there's an opportunity to potentially earn more money if you open it up to as many people as you can, right? But we think there's real value in keeping those networks closed, in part because of the really interesting conversations that you can have around them, right? You talked about Coach K putting together a Zoom to talk about the current state of the world, right? We envision a network where, on the Brotherhood app, you've got former Duke basketball players and only former Duke basketball players where you can be really honest about how you're feeling about things, right? Coach K can walk into the locker room after a game, send a 30-second video clip out to all of the alumni, and they can have a conversation about whatever it is that's going on, right? We also want to create a version of our app that is national, that's available to any athlete, because we understand that not every school is going to buy into this, right? We want athletes whose schools don't buy into it to still have an opportunity to network and to benefit from the content and to have access to some of the job opportunities. But we do believe that there is value in these closed networks, especially if you can try to make them as if you can create as many as you can, right? Then there are more people who are going to have access to them, and we all have some sort of network that might be available to us at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Another audience question. Eric Janney asks, have the athletic offices been receptive? How do you overcome inclination to just lean on their own alumni and development offices?
Yeah. So athletic departments have been pretty receptive to the software. And I think the reality is this isn't something that anybody has really figured out yet. I remember, so after I left the basketball program, I was on staff with our football team at Duke. And it's hard to keep track of all of this information. It's hard to keep track of these email addresses, these phone numbers. It's hard to know where your former players are. I would send out an email to a list of former players, and you'd have a couple hundred of them bounce back because their email addresses no longer work, right? So athletics departments know that this isn't something that they're particularly good at. And the benefit of this tool, right, is you use it when you get on campus at 18 years old. You use it to network. You use it to learn from our content. When you graduate at 23, 22, 23, typically you become disconnected at that point, and you no longer have access to that network or to that content, right? You might hate your first job, but you're kind of out of luck. You got to figure it out for yourself from that point. The goal of this is so that the day that you graduate, Mason, you get a message from the Brotherhood app that says, hey, do you want to become an alumni user now in our community, right? And so you stay connected. You continue to have access to that content. You can then, maybe at 25, you change jobs based on a relationship that you built within your sports team. And then, at 40, maybe you start to hire current athletes at your school. You start to post content in your school's community because you now are in a position in your career where you can give back. And so I think for the most part, to answer the question, schools realize that they don't necessarily have this figured out yet. And this is something that can help them solve a lot of the challenges that they're currently seeing.
Yeah, and I just think, like, to me, being on that call, I was like, man, just the advice you could get from some people. Like, you forget, like, Tommy Amaker's talking, Grant Hill, Reggie Love. Like, these are people that, just advice is as valuable as anything. So tell me about your journey as a founder. Why start your own thing? Obviously, you saw a need for it, but has it been rewarding, fulfilling? Has it been a pain in the ass? What's your experience so far?
Yeah, so my dad is a VC, so I grew up around entrepreneurship. I knew it was something that was out there, but I never thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur necessarily. And I'm glad that I had that mindset because it forced me to start a company around a need rather than just going out looking for a company to start. And I think that's important. It's been an absolute roller coaster. So I graduated from my MBA program at Duke in 2018, did a career development project kind of on the side for Duke football while I was in school, and just started to have this itch that I kept wanting to scratch. And I had a job offer from Deloitte at the time, a pretty good job offer, a stable, large employer, good compensation, would have been a good opportunity for me. And I couldn't shake the idea of trying to start this. And so I turned down that offer to start this company. And since then, it's been a roller coaster. It's, there are days that I wake up and I feel like I'm going to be the next Steve Jobs. And there are days that I wake up and I feel like I'm the biggest idiot of all time. And I made a terrible mistake. So, and I think that's just part of it, right? Is kind of riding the waves and taking it wherever it goes.
That's awesome. What is the outlook for you guys? It sounds like you have really good traction with some college athletic groups. Or, you shared with me at lunch that you may engage with some pro sports teams as well. Are there any other activations that you can talk about or share with the audience?
Yeah. So what's interesting, right, is there are tons of communities where this could apply to. And I'm starting in the space that I know, right? I know college athletics. I know the problem that exists there. I know the customers. I have some credibility in that space. But I was talking to a gym in Denver the other day that's trying to find a better way to engage their members at the gym, right? Or to your example of Christ School, right? Has an equal application for alumni communities from a high school as it does for athletics departments. I would extend that even further to think about organizations like the military, right? The military, servicemen and women in the military face a really challenging transition when they finish, similar to athletes, right? They've built their identity around this one part of their life, and when they transition out, that part of their identity goes away, and they've got to find something to replace it with. And finding a way to maintain that community through their transition would be a huge value add. So I think there are a ton of applications of where we can take this moving forward. Our initial focus and our kind of day-to-day grind is in the college athletics market and slowly expanding towards the professional athletics market. But we definitely see plenty of potential opportunities down the road.
Out of curiosity, have you talked to General Dempsey about this at all?
I have not. I'm biding my time a little bit. It's interesting because there's this balance when you're a founder, right? Of you want to have this big long-term view of what it could be, and you could go public one day, or you could sell it for $1 billion, right? But you also then have to balance that with the day-to-day execution and making sure we have a dozen customers right now, so I can't get so lost with my head in the clouds thinking about serving the entire United States military and General Dempsey when I need to focus on like, what am I doing for our current customers day to day, right? So it's this interesting balance of like long-term trajectory versus day-to-day execution.
Makes sense. Let's pull up some images of the app just so the viewers can see what it looks like. Do you want to just take us through kind of what the I don't know, the tabs are? And
yeah, sure. And it's actually even expanded a little bit from when these images were taken. So you can see, the branding is going to be different for each school. So on the right, on my right there is the purple one, which is for Furman. On the other side is Iowa's version of the app, right? So the colors, the logos differ for each school. These videos are videos that athletes have sent in. You see a Princeton track runner there and a Yale football player there. They're talking about lessons that they've learned through their career. We try to make sure that as much credibility as I might think I have with athletes, former athletes are going to connect much better with current athletes. And so we want most of that content to come from former athletes talking about their experience. So this is the type of content that we're putting in these communities. But alumni and staff from these schools also have the ability to drop content in and make it a little bit more specific to their local community. Now you see a photo here of this is the very first event that we did with Duke football. So this was the Duke Football Future Initiative back in 2018, where we brought in alumni, we brought in a couple companies, we did a bunch of different professional development workshops. And honestly, the feedback that we got from this event from the student athletes, multiple athletes told us this was the most valuable part of their Duke experience, right? This was the most impactful thing that they did as students at Duke University. And when we heard that, and when I heard that, that was really the impetus for me thinking, all right, maybe there's something bigger here than just a one-off career development program for Duke football.
So I work with a group. I'll give a shout out to Patrick Hoff and Company, who's trying to help athletes transition post-career into the professional world. Right now, like, we use a Slack channel. So like, I feel like Slack is kind of the standard. If you get a bunch of people together and you want to have a channel where you can all communicate, that's kind of the thing. Can you share like more specifically what you can do that Slack can't, and why people would rather white label NextPlay instead of just do another Slack channel?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously Slack is in terms of their functionality, right? They're years ahead of where we are in our development. I think part of what I think the schools really value in this is the white label element of it, and ultimately they're the ones who are paying the bills for this. And so the reason it's valuable to them is because they can say, all right, and you could do this with a Slack channel, right? But they can bring a recruit on campus who's interested in a particular industry, right? And they sit down with that recruit and their parent, and they can say, okay, I know you want to be, you want to work in finance, you want to live in New York. Let me pull up the Brotherhood app and show you all of our guys who live in New York and work in finance, right? And they can do a search through that alumni community to find that person. And you might be able to replicate that with a Slack channel, but I don't think you can replicate the branded feeling of it, right? And what the school wants is they want, every time you pull out your phone, Mason, they want you to see the Duke basketball logo on your phone. And they want you to maintain that connection with your school, right? As opposed to pulling out your phone and you see the Slack logo. They want you to, every time you scroll through your apps, you see their school logo, and it remains a part of who you are on a day-to-day basis.
Slack almost feels like hopping on your email a little bit.
Exactly. Exactly.
So share some. Let's run your information at the bottom of the screen. I've on the public chat, we've had a lot of people asking how they can engage, how they can check out NextPlay, and if it can fit what they're trying to do. Why don't you share some thoughts, some advice, some wisdom for your fellow founders out there?
Oh man, I've learned a ton in the past 2 years. I went to Duke for undergrad. I went to Duke for my MBA. I've learned a lot from Coach K. I learned a lot from Coach Cutcliffe. I've never learned more than I've learned trying to start a company. And I think the biggest advice that I can give is just listening to people around you, right? And I never turn down a conversation. I try to talk to anybody that I can, whether it's someone who's going to offer me a check for $100,000 or it's someone who just says, hey, I'm interested in what you do and I saw your website. I try to talk to that person because you never know what perspective they're going to bring to the table that's going to change the way that you're running your business. And the other thing I've learned is that you have to balance that advice with your own intuition, right? And you have to find this perfect balance between, I believe this is what this business is supposed to look like, and drive it towards that, while also having this self-awareness to say, I don't have all the answers, and there are tons of people out there that I can learn from. How can I factor their opinions into what I'm doing? And you're never going to get it right, but it's something you just have to keep working at every day.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, man, this is great. Thanks for coming on again. For the viewers, I just connected them with my high school. We're going to get our alumni group together, and I'm excited about that, and appreciate what you're doing for Duke and for the other universities out there.
For sure, man. It's good talking to you, man. Good to see you.
Thanks, Kyle.